So Jonathan Majors has been found guilty. Guilty. Let's talk about it. So now, if you're watching this video and don't know who Jonathan Majors is, there's no way I can help you, right? This guy is a major Hollywood star. He's the face of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And he's just been fired by Marvel, obviously, because he's been found guilty of assault, and his career is probably ruined. But we'll get into all of that. I haven't really done a pure lore video in a while. So I wanted to kind of cut through all the BS that you're going to be hearing on the media and just kind of give you a straight legal video about what happened in his particular case. Now, you probably want to see how much research I've done. Now, everybody else just probably ran on and just start screaming into the microphone, but I actually went and did the research. So this is what I looked up. So now, as you guys know, I don't trust the media, so I went straight to the court's website, and here's Jonathan Majors' name, the second one in New York County. That's where he was charged and, as of now, convicted. It's a jury trial. I went there and got exactly what happened. Okay, this is Jonathan Majors. This is what happened. As you can see, here's everything: defense, defendant, court appearance. There's his attorney. It's all here, right? I went to the source. I don't trust the media. I went to the source to see what happened in this case, what he was charged with, and all that. So you're getting the information directly from the court system. This is not opinion. The next thing I did is I went to the court's website and looked up the model jury instructions. This is what the jury had to find him guilty of the charges they found him guilty of and the charges they found him not guilty of. So here you go. Like one of the charges was aggravated harassment. Here it is. I went here, I looked it up, and I just wanted to make sure, okay, what did the jury find him guilty of? So we pulled all four of the charges, the things that he was charged with. For instance, first he was charged with harassment in the second degree, which is not a crime. This is just a violation. It's essentially like a parking ticket. So, some people say he's found guilty on two charges. It's true, but one isn't a crime. It's like essentially harassment in the second degree in New York it's like a parking ticket. It's essentially a parking violation. And we'll go over that. The next is he was also charged with aggravated harassment in the second degree. That was another one of the charges that he was found, I believe, not guilty of. Yes, he was found not guilty of aggravated harassment. You also had assault in the third degree, reckless assault, and then you had assault in the third degree, intentional assault. So those are the four charges. And again, here are the jury instructions. So I went through it. Okay, what are the elements? What do you have to do? What did the jury have to find him guilty? And is there any conflict between these charges? So as you can see here, I created a chart, and this chart lays out all the charges that were against Jonathan Majors. First, you see assault in the third degree. And under assault in the third degree, you see actus reus and mens rea. Now, the actus reus is a criminal act. In New York, you have to have a physical injury. So that means you have to cause somebody to be injured physically in some way for you to have an assault in the third degree. And the mens rea, the mental state, is intentional. You had to intentionally have caused that physical injury. So that's where you have assault in the third degree. And right under it, you have harassment in the second degree, where the actus reus is you have to annoy someone and have the physical injury, where the mens rea is, again, intentional. So you had to intentionally both annoy and cause a physical injury. Now, the jury didn't buy that. The jury seems to say that Jonathan Majors didn't intentionally cause this woman's physical injuries. So that's why they found him not guilty on those two counts. Now, let's look at the other side of the chart where Jonathan Majors was found guilty. Now, as you can see, it's still assault in the third degree, but the mental state has changed. It's not intentional, it's reckless. So in this case, he still had to cause a physical injury, but now he had to do it in a reckless manner. Now, what does reckless mean? Well, reckless essentially means is that he created a situation in which someone could be injured and then that person was injured. A quick example of that is, let's say you're at the top of a building and there are people walking on the sidewalk below, and you throw a rock off that building. Now that rock falls and hits someone, injuring them. Well, that would be assault. Now, you may not have intended to hit any individual person. You may not have even intended to hit anybody. But the fact that you created a situation where it was likely someone could get injured and they actually did makes it reckless. So that is what they're saying. They're saying that he didn't intend to do it, but he recklessly caused her injuries. Now, in the bottom right-hand corner of the chart, you can see harassment in the second degree, and I put there not crime. And that's because harassment in the second degree is not a crime. It's essentially what's known as a violation. So it's actually not a criminal act. And what harassment is in New York is if you harass or annoy someone intentionally without causing them physical injury, then you're guilty of the violation of harassment. So this is actually not a criminal charge, and being found guilty of harassment in the second degree, he wouldn't even have a criminal record in New York. It's essentially the same as a parking ticket or a parking violation. It's nothing. So this is how the jury came out. He was not guilty on any of the intentional charges, but he was guilty on both the reckless charge of assault in the third degree and annoying her in a non-criminal manner, intentionally annoying her in a non-criminal manner. So now, in 5 minutes, I've just explained to you exactly what he was charged with, how they work, what's the actors and mens rea, what the jury found, and so you know it all, right? And you even saw where I got the information from. So now let's see how accurate NBC News is in covering the story. And I think this is fascinating. Let's watch together.
And hello, everyone. I'm Kira Phillips.
And I'm Terry Miranda. We've got some breaking news. The jury in the Jonathan Majors domestic violence trial has found him guilty of 1 count of assault and 1 count of harassment, but acquitted him of another count of assaulting his former girlfriend. This comes after jurors spent 4 or 5 hours deliberating over portions of several days. And this is a case that has gotten a lot of attention. Jonathan Majors, a major rising star, and he met a crisis in this, and the jury has now returned with its verdict.
And there was a lot of talk about this trial impacting his future in the movie business. Rising star within the Marvel movies. Our legal contributor, Brian Buckmeyer, has been following this from the very beginning.
Now, I'm going to pause it right here because Marvel has just fired him from like everything just now. Like they literally just fired him from everything. Check this out. So make no bones about it. Jonathan Majors' career is over. Marvel and Disney has dropped Jonathan Majors after he was convicted of assaulting his former girlfriend. So this is the Associated Press. Right after the verdict dropped, they said they're done with them. They made it very, very clear it's over for Jonathan Majors and Disney. So, his role in the MCU, all that stuff is just done. He is finished at Marvel. So let's get back to the newscast.
Beginning as well. So I guess let's first of all talk about the charges here. Brian, your first reaction.
Yeah, I'm actually kind of scratching my head just because I'm looking at the different charges, and let me break it down and explain. There are 2 different assaults here. One is intentional assault and one is reckless assault. Based on the number order that they're telling us, my guess, and please someone correct me if I'm wrong, is they're acquitting him of intentional assault, but finding him guilty of reckless assault, meaning that he just did something he should have known better, and it caused the injury of Grace Jabbari. Then he's found not guilty of aggravated assault, which is to alarm, annoy, harass, or threaten someone and subject them to physical violence.
Well, it says physical injury, like you have to actually cause a physical injury for aggravated assault. So he's kind of missed that here. And just so you don't think that I'm like BSing you, let me show it to you in the law. So you guys know exactly where I got this from. I got this from the New York State's website, and these are the jury instructions that the jury has to use to find a person guilty of aggravated harassment. So let's just read it real quick. This is under our law, a person is guilty of aggravated harassment in the second degree when, with the intent to harass, annoy, threaten, or alarm another person, he or she strikes, shoves, kicks, or otherwise subjects another person to physical contact. So in other words, I've annoyed you, then I hit you in some way, thereby causing physical injury to such person or to a family or household member of such person. So if you do it to a family, this also says if you do it to a family member, but essentially what this is saying is that I'm harassing you and then I also cause you a physical injury. So think about this. If it's just causing you a physical injury intentionally, that's assault. If I'm harassing you and through that harassment, I cause you a physical injury, that's aggravated harassment. So that's the difference. And I don't think this commentator understands that difference. But yes, here the requirement is that you're harassing a person and intentionally causing a physical injury.
Did something he should have known better, and it caused the injury of Grace Jabbari. Then he's found not guilty of aggravated assault, which is to alarm, annoy, harass, or threaten someone and subject them to physical violence. But he's not guilty of that, but he is guilty of alarming and annoying Grace Jabbari. To me, this sounds like we call it a King Solomon decision. They literally just split the baby and said half and half, but some of the convictions and some of the acquittals don't really make sense when you put them all together.
Well, Brian, let me try to make a little.
No, but so again, I don't think he understands it because they obviously do make sense. They're saying he didn't intentionally harm her. He didn't intentionally cause her physical injury. So anything that requires him to intentionally cause her physical injury, he's not guilty of. As you can see here, both the not guilty verdicts came down to, did he intentionally cause a physical injury? And if you think about it, let's say for assault in the third degree, they're saying he didn't intentionally cause her the physical injury. So he can't also commit aggravated harassment because that requires him to intentionally cause a physical injury. So that is consistent. But when it comes to the other side, they can say, well, for harassment in the second degree, he intentionally annoyed her. Okay, boom, you got that. Right? He didn't cause a fit. So it's not aggravated harassment, but it's plain harassment. He intentionally annoyed her. And then for the assault in the third degree, they say, well, he recklessly caused those injuries. He didn't intentionally do it. So there's no issue with the verdict. Now, I do agree with he said that this is a King Solomon verdict, right? In other words, it's saying, all right, we'll split the baby. We don't think he intentionally did this, but he may have recklessly did this. That's where I think this comes down to.
Well, Brian, let me try to make a little sense. I wonder, I don't know the exact fact pattern since I wasn't in the courtroom, but couldn't you say that in the fury of what is a domestic dispute, he was reckless in his handling, in his physical handling of Jabari, and that was the reckless assault, and the harassment is he lost his temper rather than consciously went after her. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. He's saying exactly what the jury said. He didn't intentionally harm her physically. So that loses you the aggravated harassment, and that loses you the assault, intentional assault, because he didn't intentionally harm her. He didn't intentionally hurt her. That's exactly what the jury has come to.
Makes sense?
No, because it would make sense for the reckless and then the aggravated harassment, because the aggravated harassment is harassing someone through physical violence. So why find him guilty of a...
No, because the aggravated harassment, as we saw with the chart earlier, and I can bring the chart back up, but as we saw with the chart, for aggravated harassment, it has to be intentional. For the recklessness that they found him guilty of, it doesn't have to be intentional. Only thing it has to be is reckless. So he's conflating the two. He's making it seem like aggravated harassment, it has to be reckless, which is not accurate. It has to actually be intentional.
Of assaulting recklessly, but not guilty of harassing someone through physical force. That's the part that I'm thinking someone just kind of said, you know what, We'll find him guilty for two, but not guilty for these two. But it could work. Someone's got to talk to the jury, I guess.
Yeah. Let's talk about the evidence, because there was clearly clashing narrative from both sides. We had video, audio, text, photos. Do we have that video? Okay, this is some of the photos that we had here of the bruises and the cuts. This is the video that I'm talking about. I mean, this was probably one of the most powerful pieces of the evidence that they played in court.
Now, I think this video is important because I think they're saying him doing that, pushing back into the car, that was the reckless act. And if she was injured when he was doing that, then that's the reckless act. Or because when you hear, I think he was claiming that she took her phone, that she took his phone. But that act of maybe trying to get the phone, that act of pushing her back in, she may have been injured there. So they're saying, okay, by her being injured when he was doing that, that's the reckless assault, right? And that also would be civil harassment. That's the non-criminal harassment, the one where he's doing that and he's not doing it and she's not intentionally trying to harm her. He's just doing that. So that's your non-criminal harassment. But also that is your criminal reckless assault, because they're saying someone else, if you do that to someone else and you keep pushing them back in the car like that, that can cause him to be injured. He should have recognized that, and that's what they found him guilty of. Again, it seems like this is what the jury has found.
Court, Brian.
Absolutely. And I was in court watching some of this video being played to the jury, and I think it was difficult for both the prosecution and the defense to really articulate this video.
You see, I'm thinking that push and this interaction is where the jury says, okay, this is him recklessly injuring her, but not intentionally. He didn't mean to hurt her here, even though he was just trying to get away.
This video in a way that really moved the jury. And I think ultimately the jury kind of took this case into their own hands. We saw that from the jury notes saying, we want all of the evidence, pretty much video, testimony, 911 calls, and they decided for themselves. For me, is this Jonathan Majors assaulting his then girlfriend, then running away, or is this him trying to stop her from stealing, or I guess re-stealing his cell phone and getting away from her? The juxtaposition of how this was presented to the jury, I think, is what caused the deliberation to take so long.
And there's a state of mind, obviously, that the prosecution would have to prove, right? And so here they are. She has seen the spark that triggered this fight was she saw what she thought was a message from another woman on his phone. So she was trying to grab the phone. He's trying to grab it back. They're probably at the peak of emotions and anger and mutual conflict at that point. And would the jury have factored that in? In other words, we've all been in fights with people we love, and so it's not the same as a more conscious.
As Brian smiles, he's like,
you know, I think here you could, again, if I was presenting the case, I would have used also like a defensive property argument. In other words, if somebody takes your property, you can take it back from them, right? You can use physical. If they take it with physical force, you can use physical force to take it back because it's still your property. So the law does allow that. So if the argument is she took his phone and he was trying to get his phone back, that would essentially give him justification for assaulting her, right? I'm trying to get my property back. And in that way, I think that would have been a better argument. I'm not sure if his lawyers made that argument or not, but that would have been an argument I made. Well, yes, even if he assaulted her, he did so to retain his property. He did so to get away. And those excuses, then the jury can hang his hat on and say, okay, yeah, if she took his property, the law allows you to use physical force to get your property back. But I'm not sure if his lawyers made that argument. I didn't watch the trial.
Yeah, this is the difficult part for me, and this is where I was getting in trouble at home when I tried to break this down to my wife. What I didn't like about this defense is they didn't focus on what is called Penal Law 3525. It's the ability to use force to stop a larceny or theft or criminal mischief, the damage of your property. And I always go back to this analogy that I've said multiple times in ABC. And I'll use Kira, use an example. If Kira's walking down the street and someone takes her purse, the law says you're allowed to use force to take your property back. Yeah, exactly. The law doesn't say, well, your girlfriend's allowed to take your cell phone because she's allowed to check for infidelity. The law doesn't say, well, my wife's allowed or I'm allowed to take my wife's property because I need to check it for this or that. No. To me, this broke down to Grace Jabbari stealing property and Jonathan Majors using force. Now, the question is it appropriate force to take back his property? But that seemed to be an argument that was missed completely in this trial. I'm not sure quite why. For the most part, they really focused on, can you believe that these injuries actually occurred in that vehicle when Grace Jabbari then went off drinking with these new friends that she saw, that she supposedly bumped into a wall, supposedly bounced her head off of the DJ booth, was smoking with a cigarette. Was her finger really broken? Was her ear really scratched? That's where this case really focused. It didn't focus on, is any person justified of using force to take back their property?
Now, that's interesting because, and this shows you about legal tactics. I think he was totally wrong in the first part. I think he's totally right here. Legal tactics matter. And I think in this particular case, the tactic of just trying to make him look totally innocent, like, yeah, he didn't do anything wrong. He was such a good boy. He didn't injure her at all. Look, she wasn't injured all this part. They didn't also argue for the alternative. Well, even if he did injure her in that taking the phone back and all that stuff, he was justified in doing it. So I think if that's the case, I think his lawyers messed up by didn't giving the jury that out. Because if he's saying I didn't do it and they believe he did, and he hasn't given them any out to say, okay, well, even if he did, he was justified, then this is the only decision that you can come to. So I think, so this is what sometimes, I'm going to say bad lawyering, but this is sometimes what happens when lawyers, they're trying to please their clients because they're trying to say, well, he was totally innocent, but forgot to argue in the alternative and say, well, but just in case they believe that she may have been injured in that car, we need to give them an explanation to say, well, even if that's true, he still should be found not guilty. And I think exactly what he's saying here is that, yes, she stole his property. And if she stole his property, then he's justified in obtaining his property back. Now, that also gives you now the argument of how much force can you use and that type of thing. And I think that makes the rest of these arguments a little tighter. But that at least gives you a bite at that apple to say, okay, well, if he's getting his property back, the law allows him to use force.
So Majors didn't testify in his own defense, right?
That's correct. He did not testify in this case.
So do you think that helped or hurt him?
Hindsight's always 20/20. So you look at it now and you're like, maybe it hurt him. I think the difficulty in him testifying was that the evidence that came in was so strong that, for lack of a better term, this was a toxic relationship. This was a man who believed he was, as his own words, a great man, and that he needed a great woman similar to like that of Michelle Obama or Coretta Scott King, and through the prosecution's eyes or their lens was manipulating Grace Jabbari to be someone else through verbal and emotional abuse, and that this crescendo of verbal and emotional abuse led to the physical abuse that is this case. And if Jonathan Majors took the stand, he would have had to answer for each and every one of those instances of verbal and emotional abuse. And I think that would have been very damning for him, not just in a criminal setting, but also in a PR setting, because he's got to have a life after this. So I think strategically it makes sense for him not to testify. But I think on another sense, him testifying to what happened in that vehicle, saying, I was just trying to get my phone back. This was not a form of manipulation. This wasn't a form of abuse. This was someone took my property and I tried to take it back with as little force or little harm as possible, and she wasn't injured when I left. I think that could have been helpful as well.
I think he's right. I think that was a missed opportunity. And I do think letting in some of the stuff that the judge allegedly let in, I think could be reversible error, but we'll see, because I'm assuming they'll appeal. But at the end of the day, I think this is a confluence, or the two sides, two things coming together. I think his attorneys, unfortunately, put together a bad defense in terms of, it's kind of like we want to make him look like the angel, but the jury didn't buy that, and by them not buying that, you put all your eggs in that basket. You didn't give them a way to get him out of it by saying, well, he was also trying to retrieve his own property. And if he injured her in doing that, but he's still justified under the law, that just gives you so many more outs. So, again, let me know if you like this hardcore legal breakdown, because as you see, I went through it. We broke it down. We looked at the law. We explained it. We see how this guy he got it wrong in trying to understand how the jury came out to where they came out to. But I think if you really think about it, I think the jury, I think they made the best decision with what was argued in front of them. I don't think Jonathan Majors, to be fair, I don't think Jonathan Majors should have been convicted in this case, but I can see how the jury comes to that, where they say, well, he didn't intentionally do this stuff, but he recklessly did. And you see him pushing her back into the car. And all you have to do is, well, do you think he could have injured her when he was in that car? And he's saying, well, I didn't do anything. And you're like, no, you did. And he doesn't give them anything to kind of give him an out. It's like, okay, well, you recklessly did it. And I'm also going to say this. The two charges, people are saying he can get jail time. First time offender, New York, misdemeanor, he's going to get what's called a conditional discharge. If he's a good boy for 6 months, it's going to be wiped from his record, so he won't even have a criminal record after 6-7 months, something like that. It's going to be totally fine for him. That's what this is. He was found guilty of at least a traffic ticket, which is harassment in the second degree. That's a traffic ticket. It's not criminal. And then the one criminal charge is a light misdemeanor, which anyone else in New York, if you get convicted of that, you get no jail time. You get some type of diversion program. So let me know if you guys like this type of deep dive into the law, into these type of hot topics. I really didn't have a lot of time to prepare, because I went and just did my research and stuff, and then just shot this video. So let me know if you guys appreciate this. Jonathan Majors, he's lost everything, but it's just kind of the way the cookie crumbles. Let me know if you think he has got a good appeal, and let me know again if you guys like this type of video. My name is Nate the Lawyer, and I'm out of here. Peace.